Welcome to Thrive and Shine HR, a podcast and video series dedicated to helping us overcome the limiting beliefs, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome that so many of us HR professionals face. Here are your hosts with over 45 years experience in HR and certified life coaches, Jen and Katherine. Welcome everyone to episode number 40 of Thrive and Shine HR. Hi, Katherine. How are you doing? It's been a couple of weeks. It's so good to see you.
I know. It's so good to see you. How have you been?
So good. Yeah. Well, let's start out since this episode is all about gratitude. I thought it would be good to start off and say, how was your Thanksgiving? I know you went from Colorado all the way down to Texas, didn't you, to see the in-laws?
Oh, yeah. I got to hang with the in-laws. Boy, I mean, it started off with a crazy snowstorm. We got 3 feet of snow, Jen.
Oh my gosh.
So Brett and I were like digging out the house. We had just a crazy morning, smooth sailing in terms of flying, which is not normal for us. We had 3 different Thanksgivings. We had the welcome Thanksgiving with Brett's mom's parents. Then we went to Brett's dad's side. We spent 9 hours at his aunt's house with 20 other of his dad, like the relatives on his dad's side, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And normally that exhausts me. I had the best time. I enjoyed every minute of it. I laughed, I cried, I howled, we played games, so much fun. And then we went to his mom's side the following night for another Thanksgiving. So I had to unbutton my pants, things weren't fitting, and I was totally fine with it because I wrote this on a Facebook post. I was stuffed with food and love.
Oh, I love that.
It was amazing. It was really amazing. How was your Thanksgiving?
It was also really good. It was small. It was just a little group of us. It was my husband, my 2 boys, and then my sister ended up coming over. She recently got divorced, and I had found out mid-morning that she was going to be on her own, and she didn't want to bother anybody. And I just, called her that morning and I just said, get on over here. So it was really just 5 of us and hung out and played games and it was great. It was the second time in my life that I was responsible for the turkey and the dinner and all of that, because we've been so used to it. My husband's the youngest of 9. I have a larger family. So years past, it's always been big family gatherings and, that sort of 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. or 8 p.m. kind of thing.
Yes.
This year was much quieter. And, what was funny about it was it almost felt like this uneasy feeling because you're so used to all the chaos and the chaoticness.
Interesting.
But by the end of the day, it started to settle and I was like, I could get used to this and talk about like gratitude and being just so thankful for sometimes the little things. And it really was. It was sweet and small and just exactly the way that I would love it to be again. So hopefully that'll be something that'll become a little bit of a tradition.
I love that your sister was brought into the fold.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just so special right there.
Yeah. Well, now we're talking. So let's get into it. So today's episode is called An Attitude of Gratitude, how helping ungrateful employees become organizational advocates. And you and I know that, in workplaces, there are a lot of people out there who have chips on their shoulder, really difficult to really kind of get in with really kind of feeling that sense of pride and gratitude and all the things. And so today we're really going to be talking about it and talking about what does it mean to have an attitude of gratitude? How do we start with ourselves? And how does that then permeate through the rest of our organizations and in our lives, really?
Yeah.
So I'm excited for it. And let's dig in, shall we?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's do it. So let's start with just really kind of getting basic, what does an attitude of gratitude mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Oh my gosh, I love this because when I started teaching workshops, like as a recertification provider, I think it's really important. I'm learning all these things about like marketing. I mean, things I just never learned when I was 9 to 5 for 25 years in HR. But the title of the workshops need to be a little catchy. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, okay, I want to talk about the practice of gratitude. And I was like, oh, attitude to gratitude. So in my mind, I teach a lot about disempowered thinking and empowered thinking, deficit-based thinking and asset-based thinking. So in my mind, I'm like, attitude can be very disempowering. When we think of the word, well, somebody has an attitude, it usually has a negative connotation to it. Not always. But when you say someone has an attitude, it generally doesn't pertain to, oh, they're so gracious. They're so filled with gratitude, right? So in my mind, it's like total opposites. You have an employee who just has an attitude and they refuse to ditch it versus an employee who is grateful, who's grateful for the work, who's grateful for life, for all of those things. So, if we combine those two, which I've never done, which is so fun, I've never talked about the attitude of gratitude. To me, it's a choice. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's almost the opposite of how I usually use the word attitude in the workplace. So it's just shifting it toward gratitude. And what that means to me, both personally and professionally, are almost the same thing. It's just showing up in a space of choosing to be grateful. Because, God, I hear this all the time, especially in HR Empower Hour. It was happening today. Those storms that come in, people dealing with open enrollment right now, people dealing with budget. And then on top of that, the holidays can be a tough time for anyone. So at this time of year, you can start to see employees really unraveling. And it is truly a choice. It's not necessarily about optimism. It's about finding something to be grateful for. That would be my synopsis. Question. Where did your brain go with this one when it comes to an attitude of gratitude? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I so resonated with what you said around it being a choice and it being a mindset. And so very similarly, that's kind of where I landed as well, is that, we can show up in all kinds of different ways. We don't sleep well the night before and now I'm groggy and now I'm just going to be in a pissy mood, right? We can allow whatever it is that might be going on within us to become our day, right? And I can remember so many times over the course of my life where that's the case, right? That I ended up getting cut off, on my commute to work, and now, oh, there goes my day, right? Like
totally.
And it's so much, I think, part of our society where people allow the circumstances of whatever it is that's happening around them become their day or become where their attitude ends up, going. And so for you to explain it the way that you did was so great, because I think that's exactly what it is. That at any time, it's really about making that conscious choice of, how do I want to be right here, right now. I was actually listening. There's a podcast called The Armchair Expert with Dax Shepard. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. I love that podcast.
He was talking about how much he envies his wife, Kristen Bell. And they were visiting
Kristen Bell.
Yeah, right. They were visiting some family back in, I think, Tennessee or somewhere, back east. They were visiting some family and they were at a steakhouse and their whole family was at the steakhouse, and he was sitting there and they end up overhearing somebody at one of the other tables, and Dax comes to the steakhouse and he's like, I don't care. Like, he's wearing a t-shirt, it's got some holes in it. He doesn't give a F, right? And the person at the other table, they didn't realize who they were or anything like that, but they started complaining about the guy at the other table wearing the t-shirt, blah, 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 right? And so as, they're kind of sitting there, and this other, person at the table is getting all worked up about it. And Dax's first inclination is also to get frustrated and to let kind of that situation switch in terms of how he was feeling. He's like, God damn, that a-hole at this other table. Kristen then leans over and she's like, we're going to buy his dinner, and has this huge smile on her face, right? And Dax is looking at her going, what in the hell are you doing? And she's like, it's all about showing gratitude. So they end up, going over, and at that point they finally realized who they were, but they end up saying, or she ends up saying, she's like, I am so sorry we have inconvenienced you. We'd be happy to play for your meal. Thank you so much for, understanding, or something like that. Thank you for understanding. And he said, it was like the most crazy ninja mind trick type thing that she was able to completely kind of change the whole situation by showing gratitude, by showing kindness and, a gratitude in that moment for the people pointing that out to them. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, right? And it's like something like that might seem small. It might not seem like it's a big deal, right? But when practiced over and over again and repeatedly going to that in our minds of how can I take this situation and what can I be grateful for, right? Like, how can I look at this situation and not see it as woe is me, how dare they, this or that? And how can I find a way to really kind of bring something positive and good out of it? And so that example, when I heard that on the podcast, I was like, what a beautiful example of just being able to recognize that it's all mind power, right? It's all the ability that we all have at any time to be able to take whatever it is that's been thrown at us and be able to shift it and find something to be grateful and be positive about. And what that does, not only with ourselves, but to everyone else around us. And in this situation, the servers and everyone else, at this restaurant can really recognize that you don't need to allow that to negatively impact you, and I think that kind of taking that cue and taking that example and being able to say, hey, we all have the opportunity at any time, because it's really about consciousness. It's all about our conscious awareness and how we actually want to take the situation and what do you want to do with it. So that example I just thought was kind of a cool way of describing how you can take any type of situation and you can find something to be grateful for. And I think that is an attitude that is by choice. It's nothing about that anybody can't do. But many times I think many people don't realize that that's even a possibility.
Well, and to drive that point even further for our listeners, applying that to the workplace. When somebody comes up and is just not happy, right? Just not happy. What if, and it's not really in the workspace, I hesitate to use like a Jedi mind trick, right? Because I think it needs to be, you genuinely want to say, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Like Kristen did. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
really mean it.
Yeah.
And no matter how the other person responds, it kind of doesn't matter. If we're showing up in HR with an attitude of gratitude, if we are welcoming feedback, if we are proactive collectors of feedback, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah.
Now that's approachable HR. By the way, makes us feel good too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like the little, surprise of all of it, right? Which we'll get into even more in this episode is why choosing to start to practice it. It for many, it may not be comfortable, and it might be a little awkward at first, because if we're not really accustomed to be practicing that gratitude outwardly, right? It's going to take a little bit of work, but boy, oh boy, will there be, the benefits, blossoming once you
Yeah.
do put it into practice.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love the word blossom. It's a good one.
It'll blossom. All
Yes.
right, well, let's go to question number 2. So, can you recall a moment early in your career, in your HR career, when someone showed you gratitude in a way that stuck with you and maybe even shaped how you lead today?
Yeah. A very powerful moment. And when you say early in my career, I have to remind all the listeners that I've been doing this since 97. So even though this was 7 years into my career, 8 years into my career, may sound like a long time, may not be considered early for some, but it was in the first quarter of my career. So I, you know, still early. I had the first generation founder of the company that I worked for. He had kind of semi-retired, both founders had, but before, they I don't know, were so far removed from the organization, we wanted to capture their institutional knowledge, including the knowledge of why they founded the organization. And we went to these recording studios in Aspen, Colorado, where we were based. That was our sort of headquarters, although it was a flat organization. Boy, I could go down a rabbit hole on that. We went to a recording studio with the founders. And one of the things that came out of the recording was, if you ain't having fun, you ain't doing it right. And in my mind, I was like, I've never really heard that from a leader. I've never really heard the word fun being associated with work. The way I was raised when it came to work, I mean, it was a 4-letter word. Work wasn't supposed to be fun. You get paid for a service. Why would anybody pay you to have fun? And it truly, I mean, this is not that long ago in terms of the existence of the world and the modern day workplace. But it really, really influenced me in terms of what I can be grateful for in the workplace. And it's the little bits of fun. It's the little bits of laughter. It can be anything. And fun to me is that lightness. And sometimes it's even, I know this sounds strange to many of our listeners, but I've got to own it. I find workplace investigations and mediations fun. They're fun for me in a different kind of way. They are really finally getting into what in the world is bothering people. I am not the type of person who is super surface level and just has these, hey, how was your day? How was your weekend? And leave it at that. And that's why Thanksgiving was so fun. I was surrounded by other people who really like to get into deep conversation. That's why I find mediations to be fun. They're fun, especially at the end, especially when there's reconciliation, especially when there's a path forward, especially when there's an agreement between two parties who say, oh, I see it a little bit differently. I'm so grateful for this experience. I'm so grateful to see it a different way. I'm so grateful to have had this time, right? So might be a little bit of a stretch of the traditional use of the word fun, but it certainly ties into gratitude. And that man, I mean, I think about this all the time, and especially when I was in the process of shifting out of the 9-to-5 HR world and into my coaching and consulting business. One of the things I was insistent on was that I wanted it to be fun. And in that way, I chose the parts of HR that just come naturally to me. And I kind of ditched the parts of HR that weren't fun. For me, that's building an employee handbook. I never want to do that again in my entire life. I just don't. I've done it for almost 30 years. I'm done with it. So fun is certainly shaping how I lead today. And fun is the way I engage with potential clients, existing clients, past clients. It should be fun. Life should be fun. Not all the time, but look for those elements of fun. Even if you have a weird definition of fun, it's okay. Own it.
Love it.
A little bit different. What about you? Was there a specific moment early on in your career that you can recall where somebody showed gratitude in a way that just stuck with you and shaped the way you lead today?
Yeah. My very, very first HR position was at a credit union. And the role that I was hired into was a part-time position to start. And the person who had hired me was the HR manager. And it was the role that I think she fought for quite some time. And she reported the way that the company was structured. She reported directly to the CFO,
Okay.
who I learned later on really, really did not believe that there was a need for an additional HR support person. At the time, they were about 150, I think, when I first started at the company. And it was a back and forth type thing. The CEO finally said, no, we are going to move forward. We're going to hire this 30-hour a week HR person. They brought me on. And from the start, without really having a clue why, I didn't learn until much later on, actually at my wedding, which was so funny. She finally said, Jen, because from the
At your
start,
wedding?
well, she had come to my wedding. She was one of my
Right.
guests, and during my wedding, I was tipsy. She was tipsy, and she finally let me know that he had never wanted, me to be hired or anyone to be hired in HR. He felt like she could handle it at 100.
Oh, yeah.
So she finally got the approval to hire somebody, brings me on. And from the very start, he had a chip on his shoulder about me being, I personally, here I was just out of college. I was fresh. I was excited. I was, all over the map. And right away I could tell that he didn't, I could just feel it, right? You could energetically, sometimes with people, you can just feel that there's something off. Something was off with this guy right from the very start. He would have an attitude whenever he would come by, whenever he would ask for something, it would be in a not very friendly way. And what she did and the way that she handled that situation was always basically, it was almost like a sweeper behind coming up behind him, right? Whenever there was a situation where he would
Like,
come.
I have such a good visual right now. Like, he's right behind, sweeping away.
And she would make sure that I still felt cared for, that I felt valued. And, because she really recognized that it wasn't about me. And so she really went above and beyond to make sure that that
Wow.
didn't impact me too significantly negatively, because I think deep down, he was trying to drive me out of there. And I don't even know if he was consciously aware of it or not, but he was just an a-hole. And so she then just kind of did all that she could to say, you're doing it. And she didn't tell me again until long after I had left the company. And, a couple of years later when she was at my wedding is saying, just so you know,
Wow.
here was the situation. And, my immediate reaction was, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much, because her care for me was so clear. It was so obvious. She was so appreciative. She was so, and yeah, maybe she went even a little above and beyond the call of duty because she was compensating, overcompensating for this person who was clearly unhappy with the situation. But the fact that she did that was something that I'll never forget, and something that I always have paid attention to ever since, even though I didn't know at the time. Once I had a better awareness of what was happening, I kind of always have that come to my mind when there are situations where I see somebody is being, mistreated, or somebody is being treated in a way that doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem fair. It doesn't seem like it really matches. And so I'll find myself doing the same thing because I know it matters. I know that people really do, recognize that when they may feel less than in some way because somebody could give a crap about them, when somebody else comes to them and in some way, shape, or form is like, you matter, thank you for all you do. That's something that really, I think, has stuck with me throughout my career. And really, legitimately, that was like the first 6 months of being in HR. So I was still so fresh and so new, but yet that like rising up that she did to really make sure that I felt seen and cared for was something that really resonated with me. So yeah, it's so funny now looking back on that, because I really can see how it really shaped my consciousness
Interesting.
around wanting to make sure that people feel appreciated, and recognizing how much that can impact an individual when someone else is going out of their way to make sure somebody doesn't feel so appreciated. So yeah, she was my sweeper. I see her as kind of the sweeper of being somebody who comes up behind somebody who may be mistreating me in some way, or others in some way, and making sure that they're doing all they can to ensure that that person feels cared about.
Well, I love that story for so many different reasons. I could unpack that one for hours. But what really is sticking with me is that impacted you so much that you started a Facebook group called HR. Wait, support the HR Women Support Group. What? Did I get it
Yes.
right? What is it?
Women of HR Support Group.
Let's take two on that one. Okay, so Women of HR Support Group, you have 19,000 HR women, and it's women supporting women. And I would have to say that there's definitely a correlation between how this woman made you feel. You want to make other women feel that way in the HR space, in a space that can be stereotyped. There can be, a butting of heads between finance and HR. There can be finance people who have held certain aspects of, parts of HR. Payroll, I've seen be fully under finance. I've seen it fully be under HR, right? There's a little bit of this, and there can be power struggles and power grabs and all those types of things. And what this woman did was really help somebody very new into the work world, new into the HR space. She took care of you.
Yeah.
And the two words that made me tear up, you matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I get chills thinking about it, because I
love that.
had never, I think, really had that like that before. And I think that honestly, had that, she not taken that approach, I would have been okay, right? Like I felt gritty enough at that time that I would have been able to persevere. But having that be the way that she reacted and responded to that situation truly, I think, helped shape me in a way that I don't know. I don't know how I would have been different. I don't know that I would have started that group, the Facebook group. I don't know. But I do know that it made a huge difference in my life in a lot of ways.
And the creation of this podcast. For our listeners today who are brand new, Jen Trum is the reason this podcast exists. And for the listeners who have been around for a while, welcome back. Y'all know that this is Jen's baby come to fruition. So keep it going, girl. Talk about gratitude. I'm grateful for you.
Oh my gosh. Talk about gratitude. I'm grateful for you. Well, let's get to question number 3. So what are some signs that an employee could be feeling unappreciated or disengaged?
No, I want to answer this one very succinctly, which listeners who've been around for a while know is a challenge for me. Behavior change. 2 words. Behavior change. I'm not talking about somebody having a bad day or a bad couple of days. Where I personally draw the line is 3 days. If somebody shows up on a third day, let's say they're an ideas person. They're very engaged. They come to the team meetings, they come to their check-ins with ideas, and you notice you are a quote unquote ideas person on your HR team. They're quiet. They're siloing. They're not as gregarious. They're not coming to the check-in in the same way. I always give people a little bit of a pass, a little bit of space, because if somebody's not coming into my office and saying something like something has happened in their life that has led to the behavior change, or if they're not utilizing their skill of assertion and advocacy, maybe they haven't developed those skills. I was that person. I didn't develop my skill of advocacy or assertion until I was in my 40s. I should qualify that. I could advocate for other people. I couldn't do it for myself. Just couldn't do it. I thought my role in HR was to advocate for everyone else. And boy, was I wrong, because I burned the F out. I don't want any of our listeners to have to go through that. So developing those skills is super important. But as it relates today, I think, and this is just a practice I have, if somebody on a third day, right? If that ideas person for a third day shows up for a third day and is still acting in a way that's very different from how they normally show up at work, I invite them in for a conversation. I personally, as an HR professional, I have had employees die by suicide. And I don't want to sound alarmist about this. I don't mean to say if somebody's shift is in behavior means they're going to take their own life, or they are struggling with a mental illness or a mental health issue. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is if someone's behavior shifts, if for any reason, have a conversation. I mean, that's just one sign, but it's a sign that we must pay attention to. And for all of those people, I'm raising my hand for those of us who are not watching us live or watching the replay. If you're just listening auditorially, if you're one of those people who were taught to sweep things under the rug. Ooh, I'm not going to bring it up. Oh, well, they seem different, but that's their business. This is a professional setting. I'm not going to ask them what's going on. I expect them to be professional in the workplace. That kind of HR approach is done, and it doesn't work. The approach that works is inviting people in, asking why, having a conversation, and being willing to understand that somebody may not be an ungrateful human. They're just experiencing ungratefulness. Two very, very different things. Oh, I just went all over the place. Jen, bring it home. What are some of the signs that you've seen that an employee has certainly felt unappreciated or disengaged? What are some signs that you've noticed over the years?
Yeah, gosh, what you just said, I'm like, wow. I mean, somebody is not, necessarily an ungrateful person if they're just experiencing a chapter of feeling, ungratefulness, or, that sense of just really going through something. And yeah, I resonated with that so strongly, because like you, I've also experienced loss, in the workplace for people who were silently suffering and
Totally.
nobody knew, right? And
Totally.
so, really being able to have those uncomfortable conversations, I think is so incredibly important, and yet, so difficult to do. So yeah, I had never really thought about what you had said about the 3-day thing. And my answer is not quite that, but I love that. I actually was thinking as you were saying that, I'm like, I think I might adopt that. The
It's
3
free for
days.
the taking.
Yeah. But I think mine is really about like getting that sense of like who the individual is, and being willing to kind of have those conversations to really understand who people are, at our core, because we're all going to have, our ups and downs and, ins and outs and sideways and whatever, right? Everyone within our lives are going to be, all over the place at different times. And that is not something that I think is to be taken for granted when it comes to how we can check in with one another and really just make sure people know that we're here for them. So I think when it comes to, what I've noticed and how you can really sense that there's something off is similar to what you said around behavior. And for me, it's around energy. And it's around like somebody's, kind of energetic space. When it comes to, someone who, is in the meeting, they're sitting at the table, either or you don't know whether or not they're engaged in the way that it really matters to them. Are they aligned and connected with the why we are here? Is there a disconnect between somebody who is just kind of going through the motions, or can you really sense that they are invested in, whatever conversation, whatever meeting, whatever, actions that they might be taken? And I think that the more that you get a sense of who an individual is, the more that we can spend the time to really, know, Joe or Jane or whoever, then you're gonna feel it. And I think that the more that I've done the work that I've done, and I've been in the space that I've been, it's something that's coming like more and more in almost intuitively, where you're like, oh, something is not quite right. And whether or not that is, a moment of, being ungrateful or, disengaged, or if there's something bigger going on, well, that's where the opportunity lies, to lean in, to spend that time, to engage with that individual and say, hey, is everything okay? How are you doing? Do you need anything? Is there, anything I can help you with? And I think that that's where so much is missed a lot of times between leaders and employees, where exactly like you said, they're like, they'll be fine, and without really taking that time to recognize something is off. And, if we then let that just set and permeate and continue, then that's where, disengagement and like flat out, like, true, kind of unhappiness comes with people in the workplace, because they don't, like, similar to the story I gave about, Angela in my first position. When you feel seen, when you feel recognized, when you really know at the core that you do matter, then you're going to be much more likely to be able to open up when it comes to what might be at the core of what's causing the discontent. But so often it's not anywhere that even gets to that core, because people are not really feeling, one, seen or valued, and two, it's just so uncomfortable so often for leaders to be able to have those conversations when there's something that might be a little bit off.
Yeah.
So, I think that it's a little bit more nuanced than just having, a clear example of it, because I think it's something that takes practice, and it takes the time to really be able to lean in and spend that time with those people that we work with, so we can recognize when something is a little bit off, and then being able to kind of pull that in and say, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. Let's kind of spend that time and take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about what's really happening. So yeah, I think after my answer, I like yours better.
But it's not a competition, girl. I wouldn't like it better. I think we're actually kind of saying the same thing with just slightly different words, I mean, energy. You can feel the energy. And as you've been talking, I can imagine some of our listeners thinking, if you are wired anything like I was, okay, it sounds like this. Oh my God, I don't have time for this. oh my God, wait, I have to really sit down and have conversation. I don't have time to sit down and have conversation. If that is going through your head, please know, totally normal, a totally normal thought. Here's my counter to that. If you're choosing that thought right now, the alternative is a really bad ripple effect. The alternative is other people noticing what you're noticing, and using Jen's language, other people experiencing a shift in the energy.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody says anything. That person, the person's disengaged. They're experiencing ungratefulness. Other people are seeing it. And instead of staying focused on what they're grateful for, or their productivity, their efficiency, their project, whatever, they're wondering what's going on with the other person. And it just has this crazy ripple effect. So if you're thinking, I don't have time for this, it's actually the biggest time saver ever. You're getting to the root. And if you've been in HR for a day or a million days, we know, as a human being, getting to the root is the quickest way to finding a path forward and finding the solution. Don't be afraid to get to the root. It's the fastest way to success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be, it's going to be awkward at first, because you're going into a territory that is unknown. Right.
Yeah.
And yet, it's something that I think both you and I would encourage our listeners to really spend that time and work on that, because that's where those people that really do matter to us, even though we're not, saying it enough, they're going to really start to come out of their shells and blossom when they do feel as though you really care. Nice.
And that's the key. You have to really care.
You have to really care.
Yeah. And HR people do. We all do. So we're not asking any of our listeners to take off a mask, because, and maybe if you are the person who's like, I really don't care, I haven't met you yet. Like, I have never met an HR person. I'm not exaggerating. I've never met an HR person who doesn't go into this field and stay into this field to truly help other people. So guess what? We get to show up authentically. How badass is that? Oh, so good, Jen. I love it.
Okay, well, let's turn the table a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about accountability and how do you balance. So the question is, how can HR professionals balance the need for accountability with creating a culture of gratitude? It can get tricky, right? And so I think perhaps there are HR professionals out there who say, how do you do it? How can you create that culture but also have accountability?
So the way I approach it, and I mean this, so I actually want to offer something that's not tricky, that's very straightforward, that's very simple, and that's very impactful. Because if we think about creating a culture of gratitude, and we focus on that, and we want there to be accountability for creating that culture of gratitude, one of the things, I just started working with a new client yesterday. Give a concrete example, okay? And they're so small that they actually don't have an HR department. But because of my love for mediation and conflict resolution, I have a reputation. And when there's conflict between employees, people call me and they're like, can I hire you to resolve this conflict? What would it look like? So I customize, right? So this is a very small organization. And when I met with the director yesterday, this person was saying, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know how to start a conversation with this person because we're both on eggshells all the time. I don't know where to begin, right? So hack number one that I use is taking ownership, and that director, whomever, you don't even have to be a director. You could say this to your boss and say, all right, I'm going to come clean here. I want to try something new. I want to try a new conversation. I want to try to shift into more gratitude and less eggshell walking. Would you be up for that? So inviting the person in, but owning, hey, I'm trying something new here. And just straight out saying it. Very simple, but coming from that loving place, right? There's that accountability for yourself, inviting the person in to be accountable as well, but with the focus on gratitude. Okay, so that's just one technique I use when I'm doing a non-traditional mediation. When people don't like the word mediation, they're like, can you please not use that? I'm like, sure. Okay, but the other thing I use, and it's infusing accountability in with a culture of gratitude, is starting with the question, why? So if you're in a team meeting, for example, asking your team, why is it so important, in your opinion, for us to have a culture of gratitude in this organization or on this team or amongst this subdivision or whatever your language is in your organization, and have everybody talking about accountability, like giving every single person the opportunity to express why that culture is important. And then tacking on to that, making it less about, right? We've identified, we've shared, okay, why this is important for our culture to be that of gratitude, to have a practice of gratitude. But why, the other question, to ask somebody individually or in a team setting, why is it important for you to be grateful? What does gratitude bring to your life, to your work life? And then you can always ask, what are you grateful for today? Now, again, kind of going back to the first little bit of a hack, we've got to own it as the leader, or somebody, maybe you're not even the leader of the team, you're a member of the team. You're watching your team bitch and moan at the beginning of every single department meeting. There's nothing that stops anyone from coming to the table and saying, I'd like to try something new today. Like Jen, you were just saying, is it uncomfortable? Yeah. Is it worth it? Yeah. So that's how I like being accountable, right? And if somebody, we're being accountable for the culture of gratitude, but if somebody is over here experiencing what I call attitude, like just experiencing ungratefulness, I think the accountability piece is, you can say, I've just noticed that you seem a little different lately. And I'm just curious if there's something going on that we need to be talking about, because gratitude is really important to our culture. And I really want to know if am I missing something here? Is that even true? Am I seeing something that is off base? And just start the conversation and don't overthink it. When we come from compassion, when we come from true caring, people will know. If you're coming from an I've got you versus gotcha, I gotcha. We have a culture of gratitude. Why are you so ungrateful? I saw you do this. I saw you roll your eyes in the meeting. Why are you doing that? That's unacceptable. That's telling versus asking. That's I gotcha. I saw you misbehaving. I saw you being ungrateful versus what's going on? I got you. I have a very specific line of work these days, don't I?
But the examples are so powerful. And so
they're real examples.
Yeah.
This is what I teach. But yeah. Keep going. They're powerful. Keep going.
No, it really is, because it really helps to recognize that, when you can merge that accountability. And that's really where my example is, that several years ago, we were having huge staffing issues at the organization I was working at.
So glad you brought that up.
We were just really struggling with staffing, and it was just really causing a lot of burnout and a lot of overwhelm, and just it just was really a struggle to keep people motivated, keep morale. All of those things were really kind of hitting a hard wall. And so along with that, you had, you almost had a kind of two sides where you had, some people within the organization who were just pushing themselves beyond belief to the point of burnout, right? And then so frustrated because they would look over on the other side or look over here and they would see people not doing their share and not, stepping up as much as they should. So there was a lot of finger pointing. There was a lot of, kind of grandstanding. And that's what happens, right? When you are to a point where people are pushed to their limits, it becomes really hard to be able to, it becomes hard to just feel settled and
Mm.
grateful for where we're at. And so one of the things that we did at that time, because the situation was the situation, we were really doing the best that we could to try to bring in new staff, but it was
Totally.
an environment where it was just so difficult. So what we did is we tried to bring on a system of like thank you notes, right? And being
Ah,
able to say, hey, here's our reality. We're all kind of in this together. And if we can try to show some appreciation and show some gratitude for one another, and not just within our own departments and not just in our little silos, but really showing that appreciation when we're seeing somebody over here doing something good and seeing something over there that we think is
mm,
good, and being able to call that out in a positive way. What we found was not only people who really started to kind of shift energetically because people started to kind of feel as though there was something bigger driving them. But it was actually, and similar to what you were talking about, the accountability kind of happens naturally because
yeah.
people are now feeling seen. They're recognizing that we're all kind of in this together. And so people are now naturally and intrinsically motivated to want to do better, to want to be better, to want to show up better. And it was something that wasn't across the board always all the time, but we were seeing these sparks happen, whereas
Mm,
before it just felt like poop flying. It was just really difficult because everybody was wanting to point at everyone else. And so we tried to shift that and say, why don't we try to point at one another in positive ways and see how that can help shift that dynamic? And sure enough, it did,
yeah.
because people then are challenging themselves to see the positive, to recognize the positive. And it doesn't have to be thank you notes and it doesn't have to be, X, Y, or Z, but doing something that encourages that positive awareness and positive recognition towards one another, I think is going to really help that intrinsic motivation that we're going to have to want to be better. And so it was really kind of a powerful moment for me, because when it comes to gratitude and accountability, they function in tandem if they're going to be successful. Like you're going to see one not be able to thrive really, truly, and fully without the other.
Mm.
And so it was, yeah, something that I'll never forget, and something that I'm trying to do now, at the organization I currently work
Oh,
at.
I
And I'm
love that.
sure so many others, have thought the same way. Like, how do we help increase accountability? Bring up gratitude, right? How do you help increase gratitude? Bring up that sense of accountability and that sense of everybody being in it together. And you do that, and you can find that it almost like is like a balance that then people are going to want to shine. They're going to want to do their very best because they feel seen, They
Totally.
feel appreciated and valued. So yeah, I think that, for me, it's like, yeah, you can't really truly fully have one without the other. And you can, but
Mm,
it's going to be short-lived and it's not going to be long-term successful. But if you
there you
can
go.
build
Yeah.
something that is really recognizing the power of both and living in harmony with one another, I
Mm,
think that is truly where you can see some magic happen.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I could spin that out into a million different conversations. Like, how do you actually bring gratitude into a termination? How do you act like
Mm.
there are ways to do it?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think we can explore that at another time. Maybe we do a podcast devoted specifically to terminations at some point,
Yeah.
but there are ways to do it. There are
Yeah.
ways to do it. So this is not this sugar-coaty lovey-dovey. There is a way to bring gratitude into tough HR situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To any type of situation. And the more that we can get a little bit creative and recognize that, when it comes to human behavior, right? Like it's really about understanding what's underneath that hood. And
Boom.
people at the end of the day, they just want to know they matter. And so being able to call that out and recognize that and doing something different and, kind of playing with that almost like Play-Doh, right, is like really going to help people in this whole new way to start to mobilize.
Totally.
And that in kind of this magical way is going to help then this sense of this account being and feeling and recognizing the importance of accountability.
Love it.
So, okay. All right. We are rounding the corner here. So,
Woo!
question 5: how do you personally practice gratitude in your own life? And how has it impacted your HR career?
What's so funny is that it depends. My answer is it depends. If my life is good, if I'm on a good, things are good, work's good, my love life's good, my family's good, my friends are good. My gratitude practice is easy. I hop on my phone in the morning, I get on the Calm app, and I click on the daily meditation. And it's anywhere between 10 and 13 minutes usually. It's by the same woman. And I just trust that the universe will deliver the meditation I need that day. It's very easy. And I don't scroll, I don't check my email. I go right to my phone and I do a meditation like right away. Right away. So that practice of gratitude, I mean, that is my space and my time to truly meditate and be grateful. Now, if I'm in a shitstorm, let's get real here, right? If life's not good, I don't know, maybe I'm having some struggles in a personal relationship. Our listeners and Jen are probably giggling a little bit, right? Because I'm very honest about what's going on in my life. And I find that I will do what most humans do, and I look for advice. If I'm needing to be grateful for an experience in that I'm going through that's rough. And we all know in HR, I mean, I just brought up terminations. If you're going through a reduction in force, if you're going through a divorce, if you're going through, consternation with a sibling, or there's tension with a parent, or you're suffering because your parents are aging, whatever that is, right? I find maybe it's not for me, because the question's about me personally. It's not that simple. It's not, I mean, that just doesn't cut it for me during those times. So
Mhm.
I've been working with a therapist as I've been going through some really, really challenging times. And what has worked for me, I have one therapist saying, you just need to walk away, completely walk away from this relationship. And I was like, that doesn't feel good. I can't be grateful for, like, I'm finding it really hard to be, like, it just doesn't resonate. Then over here, it's, you need to be, showing up and waiting and hoping and trying different things, which I appreciate, like trying different things to reconnect. And that didn't feel good. So where I ended up, I'm currently in this practice of I've sort of come back around with my religious beliefs. I went way far away from Catholicism, and I've brought back God, what universe, God, whatever word works for you. But for me, I've sort of relinquished this false sense of control because I know it's false, and I'm just like, God's going to take care of it. And I'm so grateful to have that spiritual practice when things are out of control. If it's a termination, if it's, I know I need to have a hard conversation with a client because we need to part ways, whatever that looks like, whatever that is, sibling, parent, whatever, I have to find the right practice of gratitude when my usual practice of gratitude just isn't good enough. So my point, I guess, is, because again, I'm not being succinct, just being me. My point is things change. We evolve. Our situations change. One termination that you did last week may have a completely different experience, or it has a different impact on you. And so your practice of gratitude after work to move forward from that termination may look very different the very next week, even though it's technically also a termination. I think just trying new things until you find the thing that works is huge. Woo! I mean, do I need to get tested for ADHD? Pretty sure I do. So if anybody just followed all that, let's just all go get a group ADHD test. Be grateful for those tests.
You're like, because we are clearly on the same wave. Like, I followed you just fine, so clearly I'm right there with you. Oh my gosh, that it really, really resonated with me because I think that when it comes down to, how we show up in the world, right? Regardless of the job that we do, regardless of, what our responsibility is, we're human beings.
Oh,
And
amen.
we can't not bring with us our whole selves to each and every day that we walk in that door. And so, I really, really loved your honesty and humility around, hey, I don't have this right all the time. And when I
Nope.
don't, I'm gonna do my best to try to navigate through the minefields. But it may not be perfect. And, I think that that's where my answer was really close to as well, is it's always for me about intention and recognizing that I'm not going to have all the answers figured out. But the more that I can gut check within myself and recognize my intention around how I want to show up and how I want to be, especially when it comes to others who I'm wanting to have good relations with, at the end of the day, I need to put my shit aside, right? I need to recognize that it's not about me. And that's where gratitude is just so, so beautiful, is if I had a crappy night of sleep, I've been fighting with my spouse, I've been, dealing with stuff with my teenage son, that needs to check itself, and recognizing that has been a process throughout my life, because looking back on myself in years past, I was bringing all this baggage, you're carrying these heavy loads.
Heavy.
As I'm coming into work, and then I'm just dumping it out in different ways, whether or not I recognize it or not. And now the more wisdom I get within my career, the more that I realize that at any time I can kind of tap that out. Right. And I can have truly an intention around what I bring for others, what I bring in my way of being able to be bigger than that, bigger than my crappy mood, and bigger than, whatever pissiness I might be feeling. And it's not easy, right? It's something that does take quite a bit of work, and it's not perfect every day. But I've really recognized over the past couple of years how much it helps me by putting my stuff
Yes.
aside and instead just focusing on what's in front of me and how can I serve? How can I serve what's right in front of me right here and right now? And being really appreciative of that opportunity. And that's where intention, I think, has helped
Yes.
shift me forever
Yeah.
because it's really about being, and it's not about acting and it's not about playing a part that doesn't actually exist because I know she's in there. And I know that it exists. But at first, just like we were talking about earlier, it is a bit awkward. It is a bit uncomfortable because you're like, I don't really feel it. But instead, I'm going to say, but what can I do in this moment to
Mm.
be able to show up as my best because it's not
Yep.
about me.
Yeah.
And that's really been transformational for me and something
That's
that I'm
huge.
really grateful for my resilience of continuing to do that because now I get it. Whereas a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't know, is it really, am I being fake? Is it really not real? Like the mask we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
really, at the end of the day, it's almost like the yin and yang within myself. It's all existing on the same being, right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being able to be intentional in that moment with how I truly want to be and then doing it. Mm,
My first coach said something very powerful that I think about all the time. She always used to say, where your focus goes, your energy flows.
yes. I've heard
Right?
that too. I love that so
I
much.
love that so much. I've never forgotten it.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
good one.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's finish this out with finally, what advice would you give to HR professionals out there trying to shift their mindset from focusing on workplace negatives towards an attitude of gratitude?
Well, that just leads into the quote I just right? Like like where your focus goes, your energy flows. So if you're focusing on the negative, your energy is going to go toward the negative, and you're going to stay in what Jen and I love talking about, that self-induced shitstorm, the SIFs,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
Versus if you focus on gratitude. So my advice, start small. If you've ever read James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, the whole the most important thing you can do is not get caught up in, oh, I've got to go big. I've got to implement all the things that Jen and Katherine have brought forth on this podcast today. No, 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 no. Start small. Start with one thing. And it's so funny because with HR and Power Hour, I teach Tuesdays, coach Thursdays. So today was coaching at noon Mountain Time today. And there were 3 women on the call. It was the perfect size. I did 15 minutes of coaching for each woman, and the last woman was in it today, meaning open enrollment, budget season. She's got employees fighting over here. They're implementing a new software. Decisions are being made without her input. Classic HR day, right? And I asked her, I was like, what do you need to be doing? Like, what do you need that's within your own sense of control? She's like, if I could just start working on some projects and building a little bit of momentum. And I was like, can you add a little bit of gratitude into that? Can you add just a little bit of a celebration at the end of every single to do you're getting done because you're building that momentum, right? She's like, I just want to feel accomplished in some way. I'm not saying that's true for everybody. It was this very one specific person, very, very specific to her day today. And it came down, I'm not going to remember the exact thought that she was committed to choosing every time she completed just something small. But it was something like, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I just sent that email. I'm doing good. And just these little nuggets of gratitude can be game changers. So another just quick hack is at the end of every day before you leave the office, what are you grateful for? Maybe you do it at lunch. What am I grateful for? What am I grateful for that happened this morning? They can be so small yet so powerful. I love the phrase small hinges swing big doors.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
these little tiny shifts that we make, these little acts of gratitude can be huge. They can be huge. Jen, what you got? What's your advice for our
Abs-
listeners out there today?
Well, I'm stealing. The response that you had in a previous question about meditation. And so for me, that was where I was starting. And I think so often, especially when life gets crazy and busy and we're in open enrollment and we're in budget season, the very first thing to go is self-care, which we've talked about before in this podcast. And, so often is, we just do not have the time to do self-care. And yet you and I both know, and we'll preach it off every mountaintop that we can find, is that it must be so, so important, that is still very much a part of what you do. Because the more that you can make sure that your core is cared for, the more that your cup will be runneth over, right? And being able
Yes.
to want to be able to really be able to give to others, and just in general, to be able to give back. And so when it comes to gratitude, and when it comes to really feeling appreciation for life and for what we really have, even in the hard days and the hard times, having a sense of self and being kind of that care that we can take for ourselves, it really, really makes such a big difference. and
Yeah.
and yet it's so hard, it can be so difficult to do. And so that would be, my huge thing, is find
Mm.
some practice to engage in that's really about self-care, and it's about some form of inner peace that you can find within yourself. Because I think when it comes to really then being able to express appreciation and gratitude towards others, it's going to just feel natural,
Mm.
because it's from a place of authenticity.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the huge one for me. And then secondly is piggybacking off of you, where, right now I'm a part of a daily gratitude group, who every morning, each morning, we list at least 3 or 4 things. And it can be
Yes.
big things, it can be little things, but it's just a text group. And one of my other favorite podcasts is the Huberman Lab with Andrew
Oh,
Huberman.
so
And
good.
he was talking about just last week that one of the most powerful things that we can do as humans to be able to really feel vitality and full of life is finding at least one person that each day we're checking in with, that we're being able to
Yeah.
kind of express in some way what we're grateful for.
Oh, yeah.
Because doing it ourselves and being able to kind of go in our own journal or whatever is good. But when we actually put it out into the world to others, there's something pretty special about that, because now we're actually sharing it in a way that maybe someone else, they didn't see it quite that way. They never thought of it quite that way. And so there's something beautiful about that shared opportunity of gratitude.
Yeah.
And it really helps, I think, build upon itself. So yeah, finding someone to reach out to each day, and just expressing a little bit of joy and gratitude each day, that helps to really then kind of build upon it within ourselves. So,
I'm just seeing like a daily prompt in your 19,000 Facebook group of HR women. What are you grateful for today?
ooh,
And
I
invite it in,
like
right?
that. Yeah.
And to celebrate, to do what you just said, foster that connection, that sense of belonging, that we matter in HR. And
Yeah.
we're allowed to be grateful for something. I don't want to say should, because I don't want to shoulda all over anything. But just to get that, to encourage that practice and that connection and that sharing. All right, wrote it down. Got
Yeah.
it.
I'm like, that feels like a call to action to me. I think that's a wonderful
PTA,
idea.
girl.
Absolutely. I think that's a really cool idea. We need to think about that, and we need to do something. So I like it. Well, with that, we have gone over, but it's been such a
So
great
fun.
conversation. Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, audience. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, viewers. We appreciate you all so much.
So much.
Here we are ending 2024. We're so excited to go into 2025. If you are watching this or listening to this and you have not yet downloaded this podcast, please do so. Please download it. Please like it, rate it, star it, whatever you can do to help us grow and thrive as we go into 25. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.